Being 7:30, I'll call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order. Please rise and we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing. That will be followed by a moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will have the reading of the notice, please.
The adjourned annual meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse, Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, on Tuesday, January 22nd at 7:30 p.m. to consider the items as were listed on the agenda, and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. We will... I guess we're not going to sign in. I would like all members to please sign in. And we will proceed. And I would like to request everyone please silence their cell phones, put them on vibrate, also any other electronic devices, please. And we will proceed to, I would like to welcome all of the visitors that we have here. Looks like we are well protected tonight, so we will move on. I didn't know that we had something very controversial on tonight, but yeah. Moving on to item number B, consent agenda items number 7 through 11A2. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Zereni and second by Supervisor Durham. Any discussion? Any discussion on the agenda items, on the consent agenda items? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote.
No, you aren't.
Who is here?
Supervisor Stark.
Give him a mirror.
Oh, then he didn't check in. How are we gonna do this? We'll correct it in the minutes.
Supervisor Boots, could you confirm, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried unanimously. And we'll move on. We have a presentation, Sheriff's Department Life Saving Award. And we have the Chief Deputy. And I would let the Chief Deputy announce and recognize the individuals. And could we have the back door open? It's an open meeting, so we have to have that open a little bit, please. Thank you.
Thank you once again for allowing us to be here tonight. Tonight, we would like to recognize 2 deputies with the Sheriff's Office for a rather heroic and, quite frankly, miraculous job that they did back on December 8th. But before I get to that, I just want to share with you a little bit about the 2 deputies here in front of you tonight. Standing directly in front of me is Deputy Nathan Olig and Deputy Adam Johnson and Captain Sean McCarthy. Something interesting about these gentlemen is that they're both local. They grew up in the Wausau area, went to Wausau schools, I believe Adam, Wausau East, graduate in 2010. From there, he went on to school at UW-Whitewater. And Adam, if I remember right from your interview, you were going to be going to accounting or something like that?
Yes.
And decided that numbers wasn't his thing. So he decided to take up the criminal justice track with his education, and ultimately was hired as a sheriff's deputy with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office. He spent some time working in the jail there, and then went out and worked road patrol at Milwaukee County. Thankfully for us, he decided that he wanted to come back home, and he applied to our office, and we happily hired Adam in 2018, July, I believe it was, to come back and work for us. Nathan, you and I go back quite a ways. I remember Nathan coming through the Recruit Academy at North Central Technical College back in 2009 is when I think I had you on the range, firearms, and some of those different programs. But Nathan is actually a graduate of Wausau West. And after leaving Wausau West and graduating there, he went off to the United States Marine Corps, served 4 years in the Marine Corps, if I remember correctly, and did a tour overseas. And when he came back, went to the criminal justice program at NTC, continued his education, and he has earned himself a master's degree through the University of Wisconsin-Platteville in criminal justice. He came to work for us for a short time as a reserve deputy, but then left when a full-time opportunity came up with the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. And he worked for the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office for a number of years, and once again, thankfully for us, decided he wanted to come back home, and he's now here serving in Marathon County, which makes us very happy and very proud. Interestingly, in 2017, Nathan received 2 commendations. So tonight, he'll be receiving a life-saving award, but he also received that award in Winnebago County after he arrived at a scene where a gentleman had his arm severed in an industrial accident. He happened to have his tourniquet with him, which they all are now assigned and carry here at our office. And through the use of that tourniquet, not only did he save the man's life, but he also saved his arm. So these gentlemen have been there, done that, and that showed through and true on the night of December 8th. So I want to read this to you so I do it justice. On December 8th, 2018, Deputy Oleg was dispatched a report of a single vehicle crash at the intersection of Eagle Avenue and Oriole Lane in the town of Rib Mountain. Upon his arrival, Deputy Oleg found a vehicle had driven through the T intersection and struck a large tree. He located the sole occupant and driver of the vehicle, who was semi-conscious and trapped in the driver's seat. While assessing the driver's injuries, he noticed the vehicle was on fire near the engine compartment. He recognized the need for immediate action as the fire was growing quickly. I tried to bring that video in here for you tonight, but the video just quite frankly doesn't do it justice. And you'll watch these gentlemen on that video try repeatedly to try to knock that fire down as they were rendering aid to this gentleman as well. Due to the injuries, the driver was unable to assist Deputy Oleg in his own rescue, so Deputy Oleg had to struggle to free the driver's trapped legs in the burning car while he was pinned in the seat. Through great effort, and I heard you grunting on that video, by the way. Through great effort, Deputy Oleg was able to free the driver and remove him from the vehicle just moments before it became fully engulfed in flames. After that, these 2 deputies had to continue to drag that person further and further away from the vehicle as that fire grew and grew. The fire department arrived on scene and, due to the cold temperatures, had some major issues with their equipment and were having challenges in getting the fire put out and were not able to assist in the rendering of aid to the gentleman who was severely injured. These 2 deputies not only risked their own safety in extracting the gentleman from the vehicle, but also in keeping him safe and taking care of him until the ambulance arrived. So for that, tonight, I would like to award, Sheriff Parks is awarding, but in his absence, I will award a Sheriff's Commendation to Deputy Adam Johnson and a Life-Saving Award to Deputy Nathan Oleg. In addition to that, I'll present you with a medal. So again, with each one of these awards, the Life-Saving Award comes along with a medal. The white and red ribbons signify the significance and the importance of life. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you again for having us.
Well, thank you, Chief Deputy, and just another prime example of the great work that the Sheriff's Department and the deputies on the Sheriff's Department serving our citizens here in Marathon County. And I want to thank you, officers, especially for your service and your continued support for the citizens of Marathon County. Again, thank you. So we will move on to the memorial life and public service of Edward F. Fenhouse.
Edward F. Fenhouse, 87, died at his home on Saturday, December 29th, 2018. He was born to the late Conrad and Selma Fenhouse on December 21st, 1931. He was married to Luann Warden Fenhouse, who preceded him in death on December 2nd, 2014. Ed served honorably in the United States Army from 1951 to 1953. He was a veteran of the Korean War and was honored to have participated in the Honor Flight Program. Ed was very active in local government, serving as the clerk for the town of Wausau for several years and as a member of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors from 1973 to 2004. Ed was also a very active member of the community as a member of the Zion Lutheran Church, as well as the VFW, Elks Lodge, Moose Lodge, and the Easton Hewitt Wausau Lions Club. He also served on the boards of the Wisconsin Valley Fair and the Wisconsin State Fair. Funeral services were held on Thursday, January 3rd at Zion Lutheran Church in Wausau, with burial at the Restlawn Memorial Park. He received military funeral rites from the VFW Burns Post 388. Edward Fenhouse is hereby honored and remembered for his faithful public service. Now therefore be it resolved by the Marathon County Board of Supervisors that they enter this memorial into the proceedings of the board out of respect for the memory of Edward F. Fenhouse. A copy of this memorial shall be sent to his family with the sympathies of the board.
Motion by Supervisor Robinson and second by Supervisor Schley. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried unanimously. Out of respect for the service of Edward Fenhouse, we'll have a moment of silence. Thank you. We will move on to resolutions. Item E, Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee. Item number 14, resolution to amend 2019 funding for rolling stock, Resolution 3-19. Motion by Supervisor Nutting. Second by Supervisor Butke. Any discussion? Supervisor Schaefer.
I would like to amend that resolution. For the sixth whereas, item 2, fund the UWMC Fieldhouse, delete that whole number 2.
So item number 2, funding for UW Fieldhouse bleacher replacement and UWMC Fieldhouse plumbing and pool piping replacement in the amount of $67,100 and $291,730 respectively, with borrowing funds yet to be issued in 2019. Your motion is to remove that item 2 total.
Yes, and I would like to follow that up with,
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Gums. Is there any discussion? Supervisor Schaefer.
I would like to say that for the last 2 years, we've been preached about priority-based budgeting. This was in the CIP, but it was not ranked, and it's borrowed money. And I just don't see why we should, if we're looking at how many people are going to use $358,830, I don't think we should be spending that kind of money. That's a third of our annual cost for a new dispatch center or a new dispatch console. And that's all I have to say.
Is there any discussion on that? Does the Finance Committee Chair want to, Supervisor Gums?
Yeah, they were talking the other night, the ladies that were here, and they were telling us about the people that go to school there and how it's more online, how it's people that are going to school or have a family, have a job, and have education. I question the need for a basketball team there. I guess there was no, they took our name off the sign. They didn't care about that, but then we should spend, what, $350,000 of upkeep? I think we got to know what the heck is going on here. What's going to happen with these buildings? Should we own them anymore before we spend this kind of money on what? And I agree with Mr. Schaefer. We were told we should know what we spend our money on. And it's not just, it's a really good thing. What are the results? What is $67,000 in bleachers going to do us? I have questions. I don't know. How much is it used? We have nothing's been told to us at all about this. Personally, I don't think the name should have been changed at the UW without going to this whole county board voting on it. I think that was incorrect too. Some thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, the bleachers was reviewed by the CIP along with the pool. And just a clarification, we already own all of those facilities. Supervisor Schaefer is next.
This is my third and final one. Also, I would like someone from the Highway Committee. About 2 years ago, we talked on a Highway or Infrastructure Committee about, we have in here $326,000, $589 for rolling stock. Is that for cars and pickups, or is it for heavy-duty equipment? Because we talked about leasing the half-ton pickups and the three-quarter-ton pickups and the cars. So I'm just questioning, is that heavy-duty equipment or?
Well, part of the resolution was, or part of the change initially was that some of the borrowing that was initially approved by this board when we passed the budget was to borrow money to renovate the ice arena in Marathon Park and bring that up to date. We have a very big failing system out there of cooling but one of the statutes say that if you have a enterprise that is private, bonding cannot be utilized for that. And so the change was reorganizing where the borrowing was going to be used instead of the ice arena in Marathon Park. These were the projects that just replaced where the borrowing was initially in the original CIP plan. So this doesn't increase the borrowing, but just so you understand, this was to reorganize what the borrowed funds were going to be used for specifically. But we will move on to Supervisor Stark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You just covered what I was going to say, because when it was presented to Finance, we went, all of us asked some of the same questions. And I do recall from having served on CIP, not this last season, but the prior 2 years, that we brought this up. And some of this stuff was the genesis of doing maintenance that we needed to find money on some of these. But again, in this particular instance, we're not changing what we already had agreed as a board to borrow before. This is just following through on what we had previously agreed we would borrow. Thank you.
And these projects were in the original plan that was approved by this board. Now, the bleachers, as I recall in discussions, the bleachers are at a point where people are getting hurt when they're pulling them back in. And so it was a safety concern. The same is true with the pool there. So it is that they patch that pool as long as they can, and it needed to this kind of renovation to actually keep that pool serviceable, that Olympic-sized pool that we have on the UW campus. And the same thing is true with the bleachers. People were getting hurt when they're pulling those bleachers out and putting them back in to utilize the gymnasium floor. Supervisor Gill.
All right, I just wanted to speak to this because the recommendation originally came out of the Extension, Education, and Economic Development Committee. And at that time, when our committee agreed that it needed to be forwarded yet again, because this has been a request repeated for many, many years at this point, we found that it did meet the goals of the county strategic plan. And I just want to reiterate first what the chair just alluded to. If we're going to be the healthiest, safest, and most prosperous, this immediately addresses safest. Healthiest can clearly make the argument because these are recreational facilities. And for most prosperous, tying back to our presentation last Thursday, we do have a commitment to ensure the future availability of a skilled and flexible workforce. If these facilities, which we do have ownership for, will, by updating them and making them safe for our current students and hopefully increased future students, means that we're going to attract and retain more of these students who will then come into our workforce, it is meeting all three of our goals. And it really is becoming a dangerous situation. I, for one, would like to avoid the lawsuit that could potentially happen if somebody gets seriously injured on these facilities prior to us taking the necessary actions. I'm hoping that that is a huge exaggeration, but it is something to put into consideration here. So I just, again, recommend that we keep with our original commitment and continue on with this. Thank you.
I'm going to have the Corp Counsel address what the effect of your motion would be, so you're clearly understanding what would happen, Supervisor Schaefer. I don't think the result that you're looking for is what would result from the motion that you made. And so I'll have Corp Counsel address it and try to explain why, if approving this, it would roll back to the regular CIP that was already approved by this board, and then the funding would come out of the CIP funds and not the Bowering funds. So
I guess with that, thank you. With that preface, my understanding of the purpose of this resolution, right now, the current CIP plan that has been approved calls for borrowing of money for these three things. And so the purpose of the resolution is to remove these things from the CIP plan or change the funding from borrowing to payment through CIP for these projects. If you simply remove this from the resolution, then it falls back to the original CIP plan, which would be to borrow funds for these things. It does not. Your motion does not change the nature of the plan. It does not remove these items from the CIP plan. It only changes the nature of the funding, and it would make us borrow for something that would have tax consequences. That's why we're trying to change this. So my recommendation is that if you truly want to change the nature of the CIP plan, that be taken up at a different time, so that there can be a vote on whether or not we should amend to completely remove these projects from the CIP. This is a funding mechanism resolution. Am I?
Does that make sense? Did you understand what the result would be?
It wouldn't be any different. Is that what you're saying?
No,
We would
what I'm
borrow
saying
over
is you-
this way or that?
No, we're not borrowing. We're actually, right now, the current plan calls for borrowing to pay for these things. What we're trying to do in this resolution is change the nature of the funding from borrowing to payment from CIP funds. And if you strike this from the resolution, it will go back to borrowing. You will have approved borrowing that's going to have tax consequences. So I don't think it's up to you to determine how you want to do this, but I don't think the effect is what you intended.
Yeah. If I understand your intent was to not do the two projects, but the result of your motion now throws it back into bonding because it's still in the CIP plan. It has not been removed from the CIP plan. Supervisor Schaefer.
Can I withdraw my,
I think the best way to handle it would be vote it down. We've discussed it enough that it is a motion on the floor. It has been seconded. So if you now want to speak against your own motion and say that because of clarification we want to vote it down, then that would be the appropriate way to go. Supervisor Nutting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the previous supervisors have spoke the thoughts that I've had was going to articulate, but these projects are necessary for the maintenance of our infrastructure, and I think we need to be very prudent with not postponing maintenance or repairs to allow our infrastructure to degrade. So I think that these projects need to be completed in a timely manner as soon as possible, too. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Schaefer.
then that same number 2 in that 6 whereas, as long as it is not the UWMC anymore, it shouldn't say fund the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point Field House bleachers. We don't have a UWMC anymore. So just to clean that up, should it not say University of Wisconsin Stevens Point? I'm going to get something out of this.
One motion at a time, sir.
Yeah, let's deal with the motion that's on the floor. The motion on the floor is to strike totally item number 2 from the whereas, and Supervisor Gomes.
Then how does the next, Then how does the next resolution, how does it affect that, the R419?
Which is the Bowering resolution?
Well, it says you're going to pay it.
The initial resolution to Bower, right. Again, the result of the motion that's on the floor, right now, the way the intent of the resolution is to remove it from the funding source of Bowering, and then it goes back into CIP. By removing it from this, it would authorize it to continue to be funded with Ballard funds. And I'm not sure that that's exactly what you want to do. I understand your intent was to remove the project totally. That's amending the CIP plan. That's not what this would do. That would not accomplish this. Christie? Our finance director? We don't have it up there. You're sent it in your packet.
In your packet, there's a spreadsheet that is for CIP. What happens is when we went to bond council, because you can only borrow tax-free for things that governments do, like buy dump trucks to plow the roads, buy squad cars. And I didn't catch that. That's why we hire a really good legal attorney that does municipal law borrowing all the time. He asked the question, do you rent out your ice arena to anybody? And we just started renting out to a semi-pro hockey team. That means it's taxable to pay for borrowings because you have private activity. When he asked who is the UW renting out their pool or field house to, I don't have the contracts for those. And therefore, in order to make sure that those do not have any private activity, we moved those from borrowing to CIP. And in place of that, we put the squad cars and the dump trucks because we know that we're the only people that'll be using those vehicles. So that was a switcheroo that we did, and that's the reason why if you move those field house bleachers, the pool, and the ice rink projects back, the problem will be is that there's private activity and therefore we'll have to issue taxable debt, and the spread is enough that it would cause a increase in your cost of issuance and interest payments. So if you look at that spreadsheet, you'll see the orange parts and the green parts, and those were where we moved the two different fundings.
Okay, Supervisor Mask.
Thank you. Is it inappropriate for me to ask, what is the county's plan to do with these buildings if and when Stevens Point bails on us and there's no more class going on there? Just curious. I mean, I know it's our buildings, it's next to Marathon Park, but I was wondering what the future plan is for these buildings if that happens. And I get the feeling it will.
I don't know that we have any answer for that at this point. And we don't, because we don't know. Supervisor Robinson.
Question of Corp Counsel. I'm just, in reading the whereas, I'm not sure that the language is consistent with the intent. The way that I read that is that we're going to use borrowing instead of KIP funds. And if that's the case, we're sort of defeating the purpose by which we are advancing the resolution. So do we need to, the chart reflects the use of KIP funds, but the resolution reflects borrowing. So do we need to amend the resolution to clarify that, or am I misreading it?
Well, okay, the whereas statement reads, the Finance, Property, and Facilities Committee of the Board of Supervisors of Marathon County recommends amendment of funding of projects in the 2019-2023 Capital Improvement Program as described here and shown in the attached spreadsheet. I believe the attached spreadsheet shows that the rolling stock would be funded through borrowing, and that the field house and the ice arena would be funded through payment through CIP funds. I believe that's what the spreadsheet shows.
But again, it says as described here and shown in, so you've got contradictory issues, and if we're looking to pass the muster of bond council, should it be amended to
Just
say
strike the words as described here and?
Well,
Is that what you're suggesting?
But my reading of this looks like we're going to borrow for the field house plumbing and pool piping, and we're going to borrow for the ice arena. When you look at it with borrowed funds. So should those be with KIP? Should we delete with borrowed funds and insert the word KIP through the KIP to make it consistent with the spreadsheet? Are you following me?
I am.
He's saying down here that the amounts of borrowed funds yet to be issued, so these are going to be using CIP funds, these are going to be using CIP.
The fear would be is that you've got a narrative much more descriptive that contradicts what the spreadsheet does. And if someone were to challenge us, I would think that. So I would move to amend.
Wait.
We got a motion on it. John, we have a motion. We have a motion on the floor to strike 2, and I don't want to put too many motions on the floor. So we'll get to that. Supervisor Gums.
Just one last thing to say. I know the gymnasium, I've heard, is being rented out to leagues and such for various things, so here we go.
Yeah. So that was the intent, is so that the bonds that we do issue are still tax exempt and not taxable, and that was the intent of this resolution. So we still have a motion on the floor to remove item number 2 from the resolution. And it would be my recommendation to the board, because I don't believe that accomplishes what Supervisor Schaefer is after, or other members of the board. I would recommend that a vote in the negative, a vote against the motion, then it can be discussed further. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Again, a no vote defeats the motion.
One of the things we could do is when they bring my plan next time, I could put evaluate the relevancy of the whole and the field house and university going forward. We still have to do the current needs, but at least we'll get the additional at the center.
Okay. And we'll proceed. And the motion is defeated. Now, Supervisor Robinson.
I would move to amend whereas 2 to delete with borrowed funds yet to be issued in 2019, deleting that and replacing it with CIP funds. And in 3, delete with borrowed funds yet to be issued in 2019 and insert KIP funds.
Okay, Supervisor Schaefer is a second? Second. Any discussion on that motion?
Christie following us.
Christie, do you have that? Do you understand? All right. And is that consistent with, that is consistent, all right, with bond counsel. So is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. And in just discussing with the administrator, I'll have the administrator bring back the deferred maintenance and explanation of the deferred maintenance stuff that is done at the UW for next month. And have, if we want to have a discussion, Supervisor Schaefer, at amending the CIP, I would recommend that you have a discussion with the chair of finance and bring it to the finance committee, and so that the finance committee could bring it forward, or you and one other member could bring that forward as an agenda item on the full board. But again, we're going to have the administrator bring forward.
Mr. Gibbs, could I just add a little bit to that? You know, next month I'll be bringing the work plan, and what I think we could include on the work plan is really evaluating the relevancy of the field house and the pool to the university going forward. Now, that's going to be a bigger than a 1-week project. But what's going to happen is maintenance is going to come up over and over again, and we're going to talk about it at the same time. The committees, you know, we'll have to put some information together for the committee. They'll have to make a recommendation, and we'll have to try to get that issue off dead center. And I think it would be a lot faster if we just focus on the recreational part of this. The whole thing, what we're going to do with the buildings if the university ever closes, that's a much longer conversation. Thank you.
Okay, we have Supervisor Seiler.
Thank you, Mr.
Schaefer,
Chair.
oops, I'm sorry, Supervisor Schaefer.
I want to make amendment for housekeeping on number 2, their fund It should say University of Wisconsin Stevens Point. instead of
Wausau Center.
Yeah, or Wausau, what? I'm not even
Stevens
sure.
Point Wausau Center
Okay,
is
on
the
both
official
those,
name.
Yeah, just to clean it up. Now, do you need an amendment for that?
I think we should amend that.
Okay.
That would be my amendment.
Is there a second to that amendment? Supervisor Opal with a second. Okay, any further discussion? So now I will go to Supervisor Seiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Brad. As long as you're bringing information to the next meeting, do you know, or is, at this time, is there any memorandum of understanding or any documents between Marathon County and the University of Stevens Point or the university system? The name change took place. Hard to say what else might take place, and it would just be good to know, is there language? Is there some sort of written agreement? If so, could that be shared, or if not, should
Yes,
there be?
I'll have to root around and get it. It is dated 1957.
Okay.
And it's a little blurry, the copy, but it's still readable.
Okay.
Maybe it might be a good time to update it 60 years later. So maybe that would be a
Okay.
good thing for us to accomplish, too.
Good timing, thank you.
Okay, now Supervisor Guild.
Just for clarification on the amendment, the official name is UW Stevens Point Wausau. They did not include center.
Oh, excuse me, Wausau. Is that fine with the motion?
That's fine with me.
And the second? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? On the motion to amend to change the UW MC Fieldhouse to the UW Stevens Point Wausau. Let's proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. And moving on then to item number, now to the motion, now to the resolution as amended, excuse me. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion on the resolution as amended? This requires a 2/3 majority. And the clerk needs a moment. Correct. Any further discussion? We're already voting, so we will proceed to vote. And we will proceed. And the motion is carried. So now we are down to item number 15. Initial resolution authorizing not to exceed $2,295,000 general obligation promissory notes for capital improvement plan projects, Resolution 4-19. Supervisor Nutting was the motion and Supervisor Boots with the second. Any discussion? Supervisor Robinson.
Just for clarification, in looking at the now therefore be it resolved, the last sentence says there be and there hereby is levied. Is that correct language?
I did not draft this. This was drafted by bond counsel, so I'd ask that you pass it verbatim.
Okay, any other discussion? Supervisor Schaefer?
Straighten me out here. If we do not pass this, what happens? Does this go back to CIP?
What happens is those projects cannot be done. I mean, the projects that have now been identified in the rolling stock, if you go to look to your CIP project list, the items that have been identified now on the modified list, are the items that are being addressed with this Bowering.
Are those the green items on on?
Yes, those are the green
Okay,
items on the
okay.
CIP list. So those projects could not be done if we do not Bauer this. Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What kind of majority do we have to have for this? Because if we have to have a minimum of
Minimum is 3/4 majority of the board. That means 29 members must approve the bonding.
So we have 7 people missing tonight.
We have 7 people absent, so we could have 2 people vote no, and the bonding would still pass. 3 the bonding would fail.
Would it be appropriate to table this until next month, until we have more members here?
That's a motion that can be brought.
I would like to make a motion.
Motion to postpone to the March board meeting, is that the motion?
Yes.
Is there a second on the motion? Supervisor Nutting with a second. Is there any discussion on the motion to postpone to the March board meeting? Supervisor Boots? Excuse me, February. Excuse me. It's been a long day. February, it will be brought back in February, excuse me. Any other discussion? Supervisor Miller?
So if this passes to postpone, can it be brought back the next month?
Yeah, the motion is just to postpone till February. So it's,
All right, thank you.
it can be brought back as long as the motion is just to postpone to February. Supervisor Guild?
Sorry, just a point of clarification, because I thought originally you said that passing, if we don't pass this, then the items listed in the resolution would not be funded, but then
At this time.
At this time. The items listed in the resolution are the county highway equipment and the vehicles for the sheriff's department, correct?
That is correct.
The green items on the spreadsheet are not those items, are they? The green items on the spreadsheet are the UW facilities.
It's so big, I gotta get my magnifying glass out.
I apologize, I was looking at the bottom where they are green. So,
The green items are removed, and the brown items, the rolling stock for highway rolling stock and the sheriff's rolling stock is what the Bowering is identified as using for.
okay.
Yeah, courthouse boiler, emergency management office build-out, county road Q, playground safety surfacing, and communication center workstation replacement. All of those projects without the bonding would not be completed, or would not even start. Supervisor, any further discussion? Supervisor Miller? Did you have another question, Supervisor Miller? Okay. And Supervisor Gill, any other discussion? The motion is to postpone to the February meeting the bonding initial authorizing resolution. Any further discussion? Okay, we will proceed to vote. Supervisor Crosby, could you please vote and confirm? Thank you, and we will proceed. And the motion to postpone is approved. We will see it back here in February. Item number 16 is note. Declaring intent.
It is.
Item number 16, I would accept a motion to postpone to February also. Supervisor Stark with a motion, Supervisor Wagner with the second. Any discussion? Without the borrowing, the motion to reimburse from Ballard funds is moot, so we'll bring that also back. Any further discussion? Motion to postpone to February is before you. Please proceed to vote.
Sorry, have you locked out?
Nobody can vote. Mm. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. There, we'll be coming back. Okay, any announcements? Clerk needs signatures from Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee. Any Supervisor Guild?
I just wanted to clarify, I did notify the committee, but the Extension Education Economic Development Committee meeting for January 29th has been canceled for this month. Our next meeting will be a joint committee meeting, ideally on March 7th with infrastructure.
Okay, any other discussion? Any other announcements? Supervisor Sly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thursday night will be the Eastern Towns Association meeting, and it'll be held at Town of Texas at 7 o'clock.
Okay. Anything else? Supervisor Schaefer with a motion, Supervisor Langenhahn with a second to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.